As the doctor stated, fibromyalgia is in fact a symptom. Tend to disagree with him. I think that there are many causes of fibromyalgia, and one of the causes is hypothyroidism, which I believe is a minority of fibromyalgia, because fibromyalgia people generally have altered neurotransmitters. They have low serotonin, low dopamine, altered cortisol levels, which are not really symptoms of the actual hypothyroidism, which kind of states that not all fibromyalgia is actually hypothyroidism. I mean, people with post-traumatic stress disorder have an extremely increased risk of actually getting fibromyalgia. So, how does post-traumatic stress disorder have to do with hypothyroidism? I think that is bull. I mean, people with post-traumatic stress disorder are known to have these altered serotonin and dopamine levels like the people with fibromyalgia. They also have the altered cortisol levels like fibromyalgia. Interestingly enough, there's a lot of study on post-traumatic stress disorder and cortisol levels. Many post-traumatic stress victims have very low amounts of cortisol. Many have very high amounts of cortisol. And many have fluctuating amounts, since cortisol is a stress hormone, much like adrenaline. Cortisol is made within the adrenal glands, so when there is stress, it's secreted generally. And when it gets secreted, sometimes it blunders itself and ends up becoming blunted and lowers and becomes low. So it can fluctuate from stress, become too high, and the adrenal gland gets tired and generally will cause a backlash and a low amount of cortisol. Now, fibromyalgia talks about problems with low blood sugar and blood sugar problems, which is very known of the cortisol problem. So, if your cortisol levels get too low, you generally have low blood sugar, because cortisol is needed to actually break down fats and sugars and turn them into sugar. So cortisol raises sugar levels. Interestingly enough, cortisol levels, when they are low, will cause sleep disturbances, as well as when they're too high. And when people have low cortisol levels, they will have extremely difficult sleep, and all cortisol levels altered will cause sleep problems, which is a classic symptom of fibromyalgia. It is interesting that cortisol also in itself breaks down bone and basically takes calcium out of the bone. It is interesting that fibromyalgia is known to have both bone and muscle problems. Cortisol both affects the muscle and bone by ripping them apart, which is quite self-explanatory of the actual disorder of joint and muscle pain. Unlike arthritis, where it's an immune reaction, this is not. And cortisol is known to break down muscles and bone, could cause pain if it is in large amounts. And I think that fluctuating amounts of cortisol causes. Now, people will actually lose their fibromyalgia, and when they get stressed, it'll come back, which is another sign that majority of people do not have hypothyroidism, they have fibromyalgia, because it just doesn't make sense. People would have it constantly, and there would be not that much of a difference under stress, like there is. And not to mention, when people are under stress, their acid-base balance gets out of whack, and it causes a upswing in the acid side of the human balance system, which therefore also causes muscle pain and will cause muscle and bone damage and pain, which also makes a lot of sense, because both cortisol and acidic balances change from stress, and these both cause sleeplessness. They both cause the altering of bone and muscle, which explains, in my opinion, the majority of cases with fibromyalgia. I think this doctor is quite naive to actually state that all fibromyalgia is one disorder. I think that there's many There's ideas of certain foods can cause it, food reactions perhaps, Epstein's virus, which is common amongst the human race. And there's many hypotheses, and this doctor is quite arrogant to just say that his hypothesis is the only one, when his is, I'm sure, one of them, and is the case in some cases, but not all of them, which kind of makes the doctor himself quite arrogant and stupid, even though I'm probably 1/3 his age and probably don't have any of the qualifications he does. I mean, the truth is that there are really a lot of things in fibromyalgia that cannot be explained by just low thyroid, and I think that there are definitely people who don't have, even have fast thyroid. I know a girl who has a fast thyroid and has fibromyalgia and all the symptoms, and she can eat all day and have a fast metabolism. And also, one of the symptoms of fibromyalgia he didn't mention is not only constipation but diarrhea, which is also caused by the whole cortisol serotonin mix, because the altercations of serotonin and cortisol could cause diarrhea. And I think the doctor really left a lot of things out, and I will end my video here. And